Silence your telephones for the meeting, and for the benefit of any of our citizens who may be speaking at public comment, I will, do we have a sign-in sheet for tonight? Announce the order for speakers, and sort of who is coming up and who is on deck. I'm using the baseball analogy this year. And if you would please, when you come to the microphone, adjust the microphone so that it's comfortable for you to speak, and announce your name clearly and the address where you live. Then we will have that all for the public record. And we appreciate all of the comments.
Mayor Starker,
Yes, ma'am.
could I add one more request? The people that are presenting tonight, if you could get me the correct spelling of your name so that it appears right in the minutes, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So anyway, it's 7:30. I would like to, actually it's 6:30, start off in the wrong hour. Welcome you all to the study session of the Wheat Ridge City Council on December the 4th, 2017. And we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 6, 7. We have everyone, all of the councilors are here with the exception of Ms. Davis, who had an emergency tonight and was not able to make it. So with council's permission, we will move item number 1, staff reports, to the end of the presentation, and move to our second, a discussion on the Family Justice Center. And we have Commander Pickett. Would you like to introduce our guests and make your presentation?
I would. I think almost everybody knows me. I'm Dave Pickett. I'm a division chief for the Support Services Division at the Police Department. Investigations is in my division. And as such, we are very interested in the current initiatives that are occurring through the First Judicial District Attorney's Office. With me here tonight is Assistant District Attorney Michael Doherty and Deputy District Attorney Candace Coolidge. And they're going to talk about the Family Justice Center, one of the things that our police department is extremely interested in and is ready to participate in. And with that, I will turn this over to them.
Good evening. My name is Michael Doherty. I'm the Assistant DA for Jefferson and Gilpin counties, and I really appreciate your time and allowing us to come share some information with you about the Family Justice Center project, and also it's our hope to enlist your support for the project. I also want to thank Commander Pickett and Chief Brennan, who are two great leaders in the law enforcement community, for being so supportive and helpful with this project. So I'll just introduce it briefly, and then I'm going to turn it over to the expert in the room on the Family Justice Center. It's Candace Coolidge. I will say I've been a prosecutor now for 20 years, and I think every prosecutor in my office who's handled a homicide case has also handled a homicide case that years earlier started as a domestic violence misdemeanor. And those cases come into the criminal justice system, and in some ways we have outstanding men and women working on those cases, both in law enforcement, the DA's office, but also in counseling services and other stakeholders. But we could do better. I look at the number of domestic violence offenses we have committed in our jurisdiction and the sharp increase in those, the sharp increase that we've experienced in Jefferson County, and the number of women who are being arrested for domestic violence offenses, the number of cases that we're unable to successfully prosecute, and Candace will talk a little bit about that, and we could do better. And what we really need to do is break down the silos that we operate in and actually bring more intervention into these relationships and the dynamics, and do a better job serving the victims and serving the community. Because if we could build additional cooperation, then we'll have more successful prosecutions and help people not commit violence against one another in domestic relationships. Also, we're very focused on the elder community. We have a growing senior population here in Jefferson County, as you know. So elder abuse is a priority for our office. We have an elder abuse unit, and that would be part of the Family Justice Center as well. But we're so excited about it because it's a very innovative project. and it's going to allow us to set up a one-stop shop for domestic violence victims and victims of sexual assaults and elder abuse crimes, where instead of going from agency to agency and office to office and having to retell their story, they're going to be able to go to one place. And I was just thinking about this yesterday, actually, because I went to the doctor. I'm doing okay, but I had to go to the doctor. I have a slight knee injury, and I had to tell my story 4 different times in that one office. We've all had that experience. Now picture telling that story about something traumatic to you, and instead of one office, going to 4 different locations throughout the county when you're trying to juggle childcare and trying to keep a job. So Candace is spearheading this effort for the district attorney's office. It's part of our commitment to the project that Candace, who's a top prosecutor in our office in domestic violence offenses and crimes against children, was moved from prosecuting cases to heading up this project full-time. That's her assignment now, and she's been working with stakeholders from throughout the community, because it's not a district attorney's project, it's a community project. So Candace will talk to you a little bit about the partners that we have here. So I'm very excited to introduce Candace and this project to you tonight, and I really do appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us here today. I want to talk a little bit about what Michael was talking about, the Family Justice Center project. I am so excited and honored to be a part of this project because we're really going to save lives in Jefferson County. And in order to fully understand the project, it's helpful to kind of walk through the steps that a domestic violence victim would go through in the system currently. And so I just want to talk a little bit about. Yes, this isn't working. No. So I just want to talk a little bit about an example of a case. We're going to talk about Jill. Jill. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay.
Everyone in the television audience wants to hear you.
Wonderful. Thank you. So Jill is married. She has 3 children, ages 12, 8, and 6. She works at a hair salon. Her husband works for a moving company. And her husband comes home one night, she's making dinner, and he's talking to her about her day. He then starts drinking alcohol, and then he starts accusing her of cheating on him. And she says, no, that's not, I never would do that. She tries to kind of appease him, and no, that's not what is happening. He starts drinking a little bit more and is more aggressive in his allegations. And next thing you know, she is being assaulted. She's being punched in the face. She's on the ground. She's being strangled. Her kids are screaming. And trying to pull him off of her. 12-year-old ends up calling 911. Police arrive, and next thing she knows, in a whirlwind, her husband is being taken to jail. Her kids are being asked questions. She's being asked questions about what happened that night. She's just been assaulted. She's going through something very traumatic. She has all these questions going through her mind at that very moment. What am I going to tell my family? What am I going to tell his family? What am I going to tell my kids? What am I going to tell his job? What am I going to tell my job? Because she's been given a notice to appear in court the next day. The next day, she'll go to court. She'll talk to the district attorney who's handling the case, maybe an investigator. She'll meet with a victim advocate. She has no idea what this process is about and how long this is going to take and how this is going to affect her life. And so this is just a typical domestic violence scenario that we see on a regular basis in Jefferson County. Thank you. Sometimes we have victim participation in the criminal justice system, and sometimes we don't. And when we don't, it's for very legitimate reasons. There may be all kinds of reasons that a victim would not participate, such as fear of the abuser, fear of the system, not knowing what to expect, not knowing that there are services available out there to help her, fear of deportation, threats to the children. If you ever get me in trouble, I'm going to take the kids. So much can go through a victim's mind as to whether or not they want to participate in the criminal justice system. And as Michael has indicated, most, if not all, experienced prosecutors have prosecuted a homicide where there was domestic violence in the past. And so after the assault, Jill is going to need a lot of services, and there are a lot of things in our great county that we have to help Jill. Our community is fantastic in that there are so many wonderful service providers for Jill to see. So let's just kind of walk through what Jill will have to go through. So we're going to assume that she lives in Lakewood for purposes of this walkthrough. So she'll be referred to St. Anthony Hospital because, as we heard, she was strangled, and strangulation is very lethal. A lot of times there can be internal damage in the neck, in the carotid arteries. We're seeing a lot more cases where after a strangulation incident, days or weeks later, the person thinks they're okay, and then they have a stroke because they've had a dissection of the carotid artery, and then the blood clot forms, goes to their brain, and they have a stroke, all from the strangulation incident. So we are really encouraging our victims to seek medical attention after a strangulation incident. So we'll send her to maybe St. Anthony, where she'll tell her story, she'll fill out some paperwork. That'll be about 14.8 miles from her home in Lakewood to go to the hospital and to return to her home, or a total of 34 minutes. Next, she may want to look into getting a protection order for her children. So to do that, she'll go to the Jefferson County Courthouse. She will fill out the paperwork with the wonderful services of Family Tree are in the courthouse to help fill out the paperwork and go see the judge. She'll have to do that twice because she'll go first for the temporary protection order and she'll go a next time for the permanent protection order. And so that'll be a total of 29.4 miles each time, so a total of 58.8 miles or 76 minutes in the car. Next, she may want to talk to somebody about what has happened to her. She may want some counseling, some therapy. This is a person whom she loves, is supposed to love her, and why did this happen, and what happened, and now what do I do with my life? And so she'll want to maybe seek some counseling through JCMH. And so she'll tell her story, she'll fill out an application, she'll have traveled 16.8 miles or 32 minutes. She may need some financial assistance to pay the rent to get through the next few months. If her husband's in jail, he was working for the moving company, how are they going to pay the bills? And so she may want to go to Human Services. She'll tell her story, fill out an application, 25 miles to get there and to get home for a total of 34 minutes. She may also want to talk about a divorce or custody. What is that going to look like? How do I protect my kids? So she'll be referred to the Justice and Mercy Legal Aid Clinic. She'll tell her story, fill out an application. That'll be about 12 miles round trip or 32 minutes. And remember that on the scene, she talked to a patrol agent. She was just in this situation and was telling what happened. A detective may want to come and talk to her when she's had some time to reflect, when she's had a little bit more time and it hasn't just happened, to fill in the gaps and to talk about the details and do another interview with the victim. And so at that point, she'll want to go to the police department, talk to a detective, and return home for about 8.6 miles or 26 minutes. Then the district attorney who's handling the case is going to want to meet with her and talk to her about the case, talk about what she wants to see happen. And so she'll go to the district attorney's office for 30.8 miles, 36 minutes. And then remember, she had 3 children who witnessed what happened. And so they will need to be forensically interviewed at the Ralston House. And so she'll take her children to the Ralston House where they will talk about what happened with a forensic interviewer. That will be 12.8 miles or 30 minutes total. And so for just these needs, to meet just those basic needs that Jill has, if you add it all up, she will have traveled 174 miles in her car. That would be about 4.5 hours of sitting and driving in the car. That's if she has a car, if she has transportation. If not, by bus, she'll be sitting on the bus for about 13 hours. And so a few things to keep in mind is this is only travel time. This isn't time that she spends waiting for an appointment at each location and meeting and talking to the professionals who will give her the help that she needs. And she has kids and she has a job. And so when is she going to find the time to go to all these different places, and what is she going to do with her children while she goes to all these different places? And I could say the same thing for a victim of a sexual assault. With a very similar scenario, they would have to go to all of these different places that you see on the screen to get the services, the basic services that they would need. And I could say the same thing about an elder abuse victim and all the different services that they would need to get their needs met. And I want to talk just a little bit about the children in our country. About 5 million children in our country witness domestic violence each year. 40 million adults in America grew up living with domestic violence, and children who've experienced domestic violence often meet the diagnostic criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder, and their brains are impacted in the same way that a combat vet's brain is impacted from witnessing domestic violence. Children in homes with violence are physically abused or seriously neglected at a rate of 1,500% higher than the national average. And those who grew up with domestic violence are 6 times more likely to commit suicide, 50% more likely to abuse drugs and alcohol. If you grow up with domestic violence, you're 74% more likely to commit a violent crime against someone else. That number is really high. And children of domestic violence are 3 times more likely to repeat the cycle in adulthood. And that's what we need to do, is we need to break this cycle. We need to stop this cycle from happening. And a Family Justice Center can help us to do that. Just some numbers from our office, the Jefferson County District Attorney's Office. We had, in 2016, 74 elder abuse cases, 14 human trafficking cases, 1,604 misdemeanor domestic violence cases. Felony domestic violence cases, we had 385, 64 sex assaults where the victim was an adult, and felony crimes against children, 228. Those numbers are too high. We need to do something about those numbers. And so a Family Justice Center is a model that the U.S. Department of Justice has indicated as a best practice model. There are about 130 family justice centers around the nation. And some of the statistics from family justice centers that I think are pretty impactful. For example, Alameda County in California, they opened their Family Justice Center in 2006. In 2006, 55% of their misdemeanor domestic violence cases were not charged because lack of victim participation, for all those different reasons that we discussed. That number went down in 2007 to 36%, all the way down in 2009 to 19%, which is quite an impact on the level of participation of victims. Their domestic violence homicide rate in 2001 was 30. After the center opened in 2007, they had 7 domestic violence homicides. New York City saw a decline of 51% of domestic violence homicides, and San Diego saw a decrease of 50%. The number that really impacts me is Brooklyn, New York. Brooklyn has 2.5 million people. Last year, they had 3 domestic violence homicides. They decreased their number by 91%. We have about 500,000 people, and we have more than that last year. And so, what is a Family Justice Center? What a Family Justice Center is it takes all of those different services that Jill would need to go get, or that the sex assault victim would need to go get, or the elder abuse victim would need to navigate around the city to try to go to all those different places to get all those different services, and it brings everybody together in one location. And it not only makes it so much easier for victims to get the services they need by having everything included in one location, but also the collaboration between all the different agencies is something that really is useful and helpful, to have everybody talking to each other about how can we best help not only the victim but her family. How can we help the children? In the center, we envision therapy for children, services for children, childcare for children when mom is getting the services that she needs. But let's not just look at mom, let's look at the children, and let's help to get this family to a better place. A lot of times we see the victims going back to the offenders because that's easier than going to all these 18 different places around town. Let's make it easier for a victim to go to one place, get the services she needs, and get the results that these numbers show that we can get. This is not a place where there has to be a criminal case. As Mr. Doherty indicated, this is a community project. This isn't a DA project. This is a place where if you see that your neighbor may be involved in a domestic violence relationship, you can refer your neighbor to the Family Justice Center. Your neighbor can go, maybe talk to somebody about safety planning, may not be ready to report to law enforcement, and that's fine. The victim can go get services that they need and hope that they will get to a better place, that law enforcement won't need to be involved in the future. But if they are there and they want to make a report, specialized law enforcement is present at the center and will interview the victim right there at the center. The facility is not governmental in feel. These centers are very soft centers. They have very inviting areas for victims to do an interview with no tables and no, paper and pen, and we're going to take the report. These are very soft interview settings where victims feel a lot more comfortable to tell their story. And let's talk about how many different times Jill told her story, right? Let's see if we can minimize that so that she's not telling her story all those different times. And so our vision is increased collaboration in bringing all of these services together for not only domestic violence victims, I use that as an example, but as I indicated, sex assault, crimes against children, human trafficking, elder abuse, those are all what we envision our center servicing. And I know I'm probably close on time. Am I okay? Okay. We have been fortunate enough to have the help of the Family Justice Center Alliance. The Family Justice Center Alliance is out of California. They started the very first Family Justice Center in 2002. They now go around the nation and they help communities to get their Family Justice Center up and running. They come to a community and they learn about your community because every Family Justice Center is going to be different depending on the needs of each community and the makeup of each community. And I'm happy to say they came out in July and they did a study of our community. And the thing from the report that really struck me is their statement about how much we like each other here in Jefferson County and how we all really work well together in this county and how ready we really are to make this happen because of the special makeup of our county. They're coming out again to do some strategic planning with us, and that's in January 17th and 18th. You are all invited to come to strategic planning to help us really build this center because it's a community event. It's a community center, and we want all of the input that we can get to make it the best family justice center that we can make it. We're in the very early planning phases of our Family Justice Center. We had the study tour. We are forming committees at this point. And after our strategic planning in January, we'll really get to the nuts and bolts of creating our center. We have over 50 current partners being people that we have met with that love the concept and that want to be involved. And so the next few pages are lists of those current partners that we have. And like I said, this is a community project. It is an inclusive project. So if there are any services that you know of in your community that are not on that list that would be great for a Family Justice Center, please let me know, because we want to include all of the best services for the victims in our community. We're here for Jill, for everything she stands for. As Michael said, we can do better. And a Family Justice Center, I think, really will do better and will reduce our numbers to where they would be better. These are just some pictures from when the Alliance for Hope was out here, the Family Justice Center Alliance, and this is Family Tree. We met with Family Tree, and they are in. JCMH, Jefferson Center for Mental Health, they are in. Ralston House is in, and I'm hoping that you'll be in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for allowing me the time to talk about our project.
Absolutely. Do we have questions of council for our guests? Ms. Dozman?
Do you have a proposed location just yet?
That is a really good question. I have no land, I have no money, I have no building. Details. As I said, we're kind of at the ground level right now. We do have some buildings that we have been talking about and looking at. And yes, we don't have a location at this point. I think that the location in my mind that would be a great location is somewhere that is near the courthouse, but not necessarily on the campus, because we want easy access for not only the victims who might need to go to court to get a protection order, but also for the law enforcement, prosecutors, and advocates who would be working at the center to come and go from the courthouse.
Can I just add one thing? And that's a great question. I would just add to what Candace said, which is if you have an idea as to a building, we'd be really interested in it. So we've had a few people make suggestions, and we've had Candace and the team go on different building tours already at a couple different locations where there's space available. So we'll either find a building that's large enough where we can rent space in the building, or we'll seek to have a new building constructed. Part of that's just going to depend on the funding. So one of the challenges we have is location. And if you have ideas on that, we would definitely welcome your help. And on funding, we would also really appreciate the city's help, but also if you know of anybody. So for example, Denver has a family justice center. I think it was $2 million was contributed by a victim, a survivor of domestic violence. And the center is now named after her. So if one of you is a multimillionaire, I would love to have your help. But in all seriousness, if you know of anybody or if you know of a charitable foundation that'd be willing to contribute, we already have people indicating that they're willing to help, but we would love to have as much help as possible. So if you know of people in your own lives or here in the city who'd be willing to participate and invest in this kind of effort, that's the kind of help we would be looking for.
Thank you. Mr. Matthews?
Thank you. This is the way my brain works, so forgive me, but I have logistic questions that if you don't get your logistics right, nothing will ever work. And I haven't seen anything here in the vision of what this family center looks like structure-wise, business plan-wise, financing-wise, the whole 9 yards. I mean, there's 50 different organizations here that think it's a great idea. Are they all going to dedicate a staff person to come down there so that someone doesn't have to travel around? Are you going to have 4 or 5 key I'll say departments, but agencies represented there on site, and then they still have to travel to go to any of these other 30 agencies? What does it look like?
That's a great question. And so as I said, we're sort of on the ground level, and all of those questions are questions that we need to address and questions that I anticipate working through at our strategic planning sessions in January, 2 full days on the 17th and 18th, to work through those issues and to talk with our partners about, because it really, frankly, it doesn't work if we don't have the on-site partners for those critical services. And that's what we need to do.
And I would just add, I mean, those questions are the questions we've been working on since the very beginning. One of the things that we learned from enlisting the help of Alliance for Hope, so we used office funds at the direction of the elected district attorney to contract with Alliance for Hope out of our budget last year. So we've been working with them now for coming up on 1 year, is to enlist community partners right at the start. So part of the reason we don't have all the logistics nailed down before we came to see you today is to enlist your help in this effort and your support for this effort, as opposed to coming a year from now and telling you, hey, here's what we're doing and here's how it's going to work. But rather to get your buy-in at the very start. And we've been doing that with law enforcement and the other stakeholders that you saw on the screen there for the past several months. The strategic planning meeting is going to produce at the end of it a business plan with timelines, assignments, and the goals and objectives. So that's planned for January, so we're right around the corner from that. So I'd anticipate by the end of January having a business plan and being able to go over the logistics and the deadlines in detail.
Is that including then an ROI of some sort?
That's the expectation, yes.
Mr. Fitzgerald?
I just have one comment. Having been involved in a somewhat similar charity, I can say that bus lines are very important. And the problem with having it in Golden is bus transportation is not good. So I think you ought to think twice about having it in Golden. The second thing is, in your list here, I don't see the Jefferson County Commissioners. It would seem to me that would be an essential funding partner. And I'm wondering if you've made a presentation to them.
Yes, I have, and they are in support of the project. They actually addressed the community when the Alliance for Hope came out in July. We had a community meeting, and the county commissioners introduced the project to the community. And we did sit down with the Alliance for Hope and the commissioners and brief them on the project, and they were supportive of the project.
Ms. Hoppe?
Thank you for coming and presenting this to us tonight. So, Ms. Coolidge, my question is about your executive committee and steering committee, how those were formed, who is on those, and are those, will this program be board directed? Will it be executive director underneath the board? And if you could just kind of explain that a little bit for us.
That's a good question. We had our first meeting of the executive committee this week, and we're trying to figure those details out. So essentially, in using the Alliance for Hope's guidance, their guidance indicated that we form an executive committee, which is kind of the overarching advisory committee to the project, those that make the policy decisions, the high-level people that are on that committee. Under that is a steering committee. The steering committee kind of boots on the ground with the project, and then under that are 4 different work groups that report up to the steering committee. We have governance and finance. We have service and delivery, community outreach, and funding and sustainability work groups. Funding and sustainability.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Duran?
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. As a domestic violence survivor myself, I applaud you for making this effort. I would have loved to have had something like this when I was going through this. So you're already victimized once, and then you're victimized, 5, 6, 7, 10 times as you're trying to work through the process. So I think it's a great start. I realize we have a lot of questions, but so do you. But you have my support. I'm invested in this, and I want to see this be successful. So I look forward to the next presentation. I assume that we'll get updates along the way. So thank you so much. I appreciate this. And if I can help in any way, let me know.
Thank you very much.
Other questions from council? Mr. Urban?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My first question is as it relates to the partners that you've coalesced so far. Has there been any discussion around including partners in the employment or workforce development arena, or has there been any partners in that realm that's been considered?
Absolutely. We've been working with the Department of Human Services. I know that they have AmeriCorps, because we absolutely, a big piece of this would be resume building and career building and helping to get jobs.
And I think is either a function of that, or as it relates to that, working with employers to help them understand what is going on in the course of this investigation or what have you, and working with these victims to engage their employer in an appropriate way so that they don't lose their jobs as they're going through this, or making sure employers are aware of that. And then my next question as it relates to sort of the outcomes, and as much as a prosecution is a solid outcome, are there other metrics that are going to be used across the entire center and have you looked at what those metrics might be and how that is going to be developed?
Yes, so I met with Dr. Ann DePrince at the University of Denver. She's in their research department. She was working with the Rosandom Center to kind of benchmark their success. And she's also looking for funding to help us to do that benchmarking and to scale the impact of the center. I think that's very important to do.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council for our guests? Ms. Dozeman.
So I'd just like to thank you for coming and providing this presentation. I am definitely on board with this, and I love the idea. What is it that you are looking for from us specifically at this point in time as far as buy-in and how we can help?
I'm looking for your support. Wanted to inform you of the project and get your support for the project.
And in addition to that, if there are areas of expertise that you offer or that you have people in your lives and workplace that could help with this project, we'd love to have their help. And again, the funding and the location is something that we're going to be working very hard on over the next year. So we'd love to have your support and your guidance on people in the community or groups in the community that'd be willing to help. I mean, the Rosandom Center in Denver, which we visited, and if you wanted to go, we'd be happy to set up a tour for you. They'd be happy to take you through. And it's not, you know, the Denver model is not going to be our model, but the point of this piece is that the Rosandom Center, the computers, a lot of the office equipment, the structure itself, all donated by different private companies. So reaching out to private computer companies, for example, private furniture companies, different vendors who might be interested in taking a stand and making a difference in these kinds of cases that impact all of us and impact our community. The Rosandom Center started with that contribution from the domestic violence survivor, but the other monies that were needed and the equipment and furniture within was donated by different private companies. So we'll be looking for those as well. So you're all obviously leaders in your community, and you know the community better than we do. So if there are people or organizations in the community that should join us in this effort, we'd love to have your input.
Well, thank you very much. It's a very good presentation. I really appreciate you coming. Would you please keep us informed about the details on your strategic planning session in January? I'm sure there may be some council members that would like to attend, and we'd love to stay in touch with you on this program.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I should announce, and I should have done this before, that we did not have anyone signed up for public comments, so we hopefully have discharged that. All right. I would like to welcome Ms. Diane Robb, to our meeting to give us on agenda item number 3, which is a presentation on the cultural vision presentation from the Cultural Commission. So, Ms. Robb, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity of sharing with you this evening. I'm Diane Robb, Chair of the Cultural Commission, and we have a number of cultural commissioners present as well, and I would like for them to introduce themselves and their district that they're in.
May I ask you to step to a microphone? We have one here, because I know all the members of our audience would like to.
Carol Matthews, District 4.
Sandra Nance, District 4.
Gay Porter Danilian, I'm the at-large commissioner. Jareth Gronsky, District 3.
Dave Opp, District 3.
Thank you.
The cultural vision of Wheat Ridge. Cultural arts play a vital role in the economic and aesthetic development and viability of a community. Therefore, Wheat Ridge aspires to become a city where the arts are an integral part of its cultural fabric. Public art and other cultural activities will reflect the eclectic and diverse personality of the city, and artistic elements and expression throughout its neighborhoods will be encouraged. We hope the City Council is pleased with the work that the Cultural Commission has done, and we are now ready to go to work in making arts and culture truly a shining point of Wheat Ridge. It is a working document, so we are not asking for any codification at this time. Please note that we recognize the eclectic nature of our beautiful city and in no way intend to dictate the type nor style of artistic endeavors. It is our goal to facilitate and encourage. It is our goal to have arts and culture be the relevant thread that runs throughout and within everything that happens here in Wheat Ridge. Your enclosed packet outlines the many action steps in initiating this cultural vision. The first couple of action items will be sharing this cultural vision with the community and stakeholders. Working in conjunction with the city staff, we will be starting on a marketing PR campaign. This will include creating brochures and other marketing and informational materials to share with all parties. The Cultural Commission thanks the City Council for the support and looks forward to sharing with you on a regular basis the progress of making arts and culture truly an integral part of this awesome city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Robb. Do we have questions from council? Ms. Hoppy?
I don't really have a question. I'd just like to say that thank you very much for all the work you guys put into this. And I know that you started from scratch and that this was a thought that you wanted to work on this year. And you guys have done a really great job coming up with a final product. And I would like to say that thank you because you also helped us fulfill one of our goals already from our strategic planning meeting, which was to support the Cultural Commission in coming up with a vision. So we've got that one checked off already. So I would just want to say thank you very much for all your work.
Very good. Other questions or comments from council? Mr. Pond?
Well, actually, I just want to ditto that. This is a lot of work. I will say I appreciate the two of the things that you mentioned, which is the broadness and inclusivity of the vision and the parts of this, and the flexibility of understanding that it's a living document and that it has some room to grow and live. And I appreciate all of that. I hope we can continue to be helpful to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Matthews?
I have a logistics question again. We have probably, like any other organization, we probably have a communications issue between divisions. And since our boards and commissions are somewhat separate entities and don't actually meet here at City Hall, what can we do to help you be in the loop, or do you need help being in the loop on opportunities that are arising in the community? There, whether it be a new business development or even a new, for instance, the work out at the train station or across the highway. There are long-term plans. Is there something that we can do to assist you in being in on the ground floor of those so we don't miss the opportunity to have a integrated approach to the whole city?
Mm-hmm. First off, it is our goal for everybody within the city to think about arts and culture. When there's a planning commission, when there's a planning meeting, anything, we want to make sure arts and culture is a part of that. And I appreciate your logistics question because I don't have the ultimate answer for that, Mr. Matthews, but that is something that we truly want to work on and work with. One of our thought processes is when we start doing a marketing and PR campaign, it's not only to reach the citizens, but to reach all of the city staff and to reach all of the commissions and boards. And so it is at the forefront of all the planning and all of the activities that go forth. Not that we want to be at every meeting, not that we want to tell you what to do. We want to make sure we're part of the conversation, and we want to make sure you're aware that arts and culture can only help grow this city. One thing specific we are going to approach is working on a brochure that we can hand out to prospective developers or planners, that it doesn't say, this is what we expect, you have to do this, but it says, the city of Wheat Ridge believes in their arts and culture and encourages arts and culture. And that is one specific item that we're looking at doing, so we can start reaching out to people not only that already live here, but are starting to do business, that are even interested in what Wheat Ridge is about. We're about arts and culture also.
Ms. Duran?
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. What I appreciate is that you're encouraging a different diversity of arts, which I think is, and culture, which is really important. You mentioned in here too that you want to have a stronger online resource network. What is that going to look like? What are you anticipating there?
What we are, and we are just in the planning stages of this, but we would like a stronger online presence through the city website. Right now, the city website, arts and culture, is kind of buried. You have to work hard at finding us, and you have to work hard at finding, you know, the public art management plan and all these other things. So what we are doing is that we are looking at what ideally we would like it to look like underneath the umbrella of the city website, and then work with the city website developer to see how it will all incorporate. But we will actually come to the city website developer and say, this is ideal, this is what the city has, how do we make it work?
Okay, great. And then you'll have your events and everything on there too, so that on the calendar,
Yes.
people can see those a little easier.
Yes,
Okay.
so people can immediately see events. People can immediately find the public art management plan. People can immediately be directed towards different resources. Know where to start when, for example, I get a phone call saying, hey, we want to do a mural. And I say, great. And they haven't even been able to find us on the website.
Yeah.
So we need to, that's one of our action plans.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you. That sounds wonderful.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgerald?
I have a question for the city manager. I am aware that one of our project developers volunteered some art, but I'm wondering, do we have a requirement that the developers contribute something to arts as Denver does, for example?
No, there's no requirement that a developer contributes art, but we do have a public art policy where we do collect fees for different projects, and it's collected differently depending on if it's an urban renewal area or if it's a private development. So those fees come in. It doesn't actually come from the developer. The fees for a private development come from a portion of the fees that the developer pays for use tax, plan review fees. We put a portion of that into the public art fund. Then if there's any state or city public project that we're doing, we put 1% of that budget into a public art fund. So then those, I think the public art policy does state that for the public projects that there will be art located within that area. It's not real specific that says it has to be exactly in this project, but as an example, let's see, the city did, you know, the hook ramps. Let's say the hook ramps, we're spending $10 million on the hook ramps on I-70. That's a public project that the city's funding. And so 1% of that budget is going into the public art funds. So the public art policy says that public art will be included in the area of that project. So that goes to the public or the cultural commission. There's a policy on how art gets chosen and located and placed. So that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Dozeman.
Thank you for coming in and presenting, Diane. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the Cultural Commission fostering that partnership within the city, especially with private entities and businesses. I think that that encompasses what we really need as a whole. Could you speak a little bit to the Art on Loan program, though?
The Art on Loan program is a program that is utilized in many, many cities throughout the United States, where they invite artists to display larger pieces of art, such as on a main street, for a certain period of time. And the artists will place their pieces on loan, and then the committee, the city, however it's organized, tries then to sell the piece or pieces and or collect monies for the favorite piece, and that helps create more art within a city. We have discussed it briefly. It is on one of our action plans. Realistically, it probably is a couple of years down the road because we do need to generate funds for that. We cannot use the public art funds for that. It's very specific what we can use the public art funds for, and Art on Loan is not part of it.
If you have a follow-up, yes.
Could you speak to the process of getting public art or getting art on private businesses or?
If a private business wants to place artwork, that's their business, okay? But one, we want to be able to encourage businesses to place artwork that is considered public art, and so it's accessible to everyone, and it increases the value of the whole property, and the whole environment is increased when there is art there. We also want to be able to be a resource to these individuals when they come to us and say, well, yes, we're building, we would like something, could you help direct us? And we would like to be a resource for them, not to tell them what it should be. We don't want to say, Mr. Developer, we want you to have a bronze bear on this corner. No, we want to say, what kind of artwork are you looking at? We can help direct you. We can give you some ideas, some suggestions. We can also maybe talk about some cooperation between the city and the developer about some public art.
Thank you. Ms. Hoppy, did you have you're okay? Good. Mr. Matthews?
I'm just curious, as I was mulling this over, do you have any working relationships with art groups around the city or the county and the colleges, or are you working at building some partners that way where they're either developing artists or developing art and kind of networking with them?
Yes, okay. Personally and as a cultural commission. And what we are doing is we are reaching out to many different arts organizations and learning and listening. And when we see a project going on in the metro area, or even any place that we see one advertised or publicized, We read about it. We're developing quite a library, a stack of papers is what it is actually, of different ideas. And so the Cultural Commission, if I can say, has been around for a long time, but it's just been the last few years that we have really started to form as a cohesive group and really start moving forward. And right now we have more ideas than what we can implement. And we decided to step back and say, we start with a cultural vision. We work with City Council to let you know what we're doing because we do work under your auspices. And now we have some preliminary steps we're taking as far as starting to get word out into the community, starting to develop some marketing materials, starting to have something to hand to developers. It's not telling developers what to do, but hey, here's some ideas. This is what Wheat Ridge is about. And I feel like we're at the ground level, and it's starting to snowball, and it's very exciting, very exciting. We've already had a couple of people contact us and say, hey, what about, or can we do this, and my pat answer is, please put together a proposal and come to Cultural Commission and let's talk, because we want to facilitate. We do not want to tell these groups what to do. We want to facilitate the groups. This group wants to do something, great, come on in, let's talk about it. And we can help facilitate it through the city and through the minefields that are prevalent when you're talking about public art.
Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As much as I see this document being a vision document which helps you kind of look forward, I'm curious as it relates to specific performance measures and specifically as it relates to sort of understanding what either the marketplace is for artists in Wheat Ridge and or the total number of artists residing in Wheat Ridge, and how we can either put a number to that or metrics to that so that we're either growing the amount of artists that we have residing in Wheat Ridge or the total amount of art being bought and sold in Wheat Ridge as sort of a economic side to this equation. As much as art is beautiful to look at, it's even better when it's got some sales tax on it.
Exactly. And the more the Cultural Commission is becoming relevant, the more arts community we are becoming aware of here in the city of Wheat Ridge. We have a huge artist base here in Wheat Ridge that isn't very well known, but we have a number of artists that are true professionals that support their families through the arts. And just 2 weeks ago, I met a gentleman, and he's very involved in the arts, and he has an office here and one in Las Vegas and one in Orange County. And I said, and you're here in Wheat Ridge in District 1, and I don't know you? And he says, but I live here because it's such a beautiful community. I can raise my family here. And yet he is offering his services to us, saying, you know what? I'm a professional. How can I help you? And so we do need to create a metrics of measurement. We do not have that right now, Zach.
Okay.
And we, on our to-do list.
And I guess I'll just point you real quick. The National Center for the Arts research has like a Arts Vibrancy Index, and that goes into some of those metrics that you may or may not be able to apply within the city, but that's sort of a template to look at.
Thank you.
Additional questions or comments from the councilor? Well, I would like to thank you very much, Ms. Robb, for attending and giving us a great presentation, bringing your commissioners here with you. We appreciate you all coming to us, and thank you, and we'll look forward to some more reports and some more action.
Thank
all right?
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next order of business is item number 4. This is the Withdrawal Management Services MOU. Memorandum of Understanding is MOU, and I believe Mr. Goff has a presentation for us.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the mayor said, this is tonight in front of you is for consideration is a MOU for withdrawal management services, or we call it sometimes detox services, detoxification services. There's numerous phrases for what this is. And the MOU that we're looking at and have been working on for the last 6 months is with Jefferson Center for Mental Health, Jefferson County, the cities of Arvada, Edgewater, Golden, Lakewood, Wheat Ridge, and Westminster. And if you remember, staff gave you an update several months ago when Arapahoe House, who was the nonprofit that was providing the detox services for many years, decided they could no longer do that. They were subsidizing those services at a rate that was higher than they could afford, and Arapahoe House provides a lot of other long-term addiction type services, and detox services was just one of those. So they decided that they could no longer provide those services. Detox services are a statewide concern. The Colorado State Legislature determined that many years ago, and they do provide some funding for it, but not enough funding to cover it all. The state provides funding. There's also Medicaid, and there's some self-Medicaid or Medicare, and there's also some self-funding from some of the clients that use this service. But Arapahoe House notified us late 2016 that they were going to cease providing services as soon as January of this last year, or at the latest, June 30th. So all the other parties that I mentioned before got together and discussed the importance of making sure that we have these detox services in our community. And we all gathered funding together to ensure that Arapahoe House would continue providing services through at least June 30th, so that we had time to find another vendor that would provide these services for us. So if you remember, I came to you several months ago and got your okay to provide $12,637. That was the city's portion. I think the total was $259,000 is the amount we tried to raise to assist Arapahoe House to continue their services. Of that, $12,637 came from Wheat Ridge. Fortunately, Jefferson Center for Mental Health stepped up pretty quickly. As you know, they're here in Wheat Ridge, and they provide a variety of mental health services, crisis services, and they feel that addiction, alcohol addiction and drug addiction is part of what some of their client base deals with, and they felt an integrated system of providing detox services with some of these other mental health services was a good program, a good way to do it, a good business model. So they stepped up. They did. They took over for Arapahoe House shortly before the Arapahoe House quit. I think like June 27th. I think they started actually, and Jefferson Center purchased the Arapahoe House building, which is on Wadsworth, which is, as you know, a historic building. And we're building a sidewalk around it. And so they're the new owners, and they're currently, they have a building permit right now. They are doing some work on the second floor of the building for some more intensive crisis management to go along with their detox. So they're going to try to provide more of an integrated service program than Arapahoe House was. So we obviously needed some type of an agreement with all the parties to that would dictate the terms and obligations of our relationship with Jefferson Center. As I mentioned, Arapahoe House couldn't afford to do this. They were losing money on it. Jefferson Center could not do it. They didn't believe they could do it either without having some additional financial assistance. So they've asked for $500,000 from all the Jefferson County partners. And as you can see in the report, our portion of that, the City of Wheat Ridge's portion, is based on population, and our portion would be for 2018, $30,100. And that would increase annually based on the Denver Boulder Greeley Consumer Price Index. The draft MOU that's in your packet has been through about 150 attorneys, 7 city managers, a county manager, so it's taken quite some time. The term of the effective date of the MOU would be January 1st of 2018, so we would like to bring this back to City Council next Monday for final approval. We do have the $30,100 budgeted in 2018 to contribute funding to Jefferson Center to continue providing these services. Any questions?
We'll start clockwise with Ms. Dozeman.
So what is the trade-off in the budget to be able to afford this kind of subsidizing each year?
Trade-off?
Yeah, as in, like, are we going to have to take away from some other?
No, we had plenty of notice, fortunately, to incorporate it into the budget process, and so we didn't necessarily cut anything to add this expense. It just, we made it work in the 2018 budget. I'm sorry?
In the future, will that continue, like if it increases annually?
Yeah, you know, it's an annual budget practice where, you know, if this is a program that City Council wants to take on and makes it a priority, we just have to make it work, and we have to fit it in the budget. So we do that annually.
Other questions, Ms. Hoppy?
Not really a question. I just wanted to, for those out there who don't have this memo in front of them, I just wanted to let them know that there are reporting requirements. There's a quarterly reporting requirement, an annual report requirement, and then there are, of course, ones that they have to do by law because of the work they're doing. But then there's also room in there for additional reports as requested by local government members.
Yeah, great point. Thank you, Ms. Hoppy. That was something that was very important to all the parties because we weren't getting that from Arapahoe House, honestly. And, you know, Mr. Urban would question he likes to ask is like, well, you know, what's the ROI on this, right? And you know, are we paying for more than what you know, number of clients from Wheat Ridge are potentially using the center, and we're hoping with more detailed reporting that we can look at that, and if it looks like for some reason Wheat Ridge is not sending many clients from Wheat Ridge there, that, you know, I think we look at a new formula structure. It wouldn't be based on population, but it might be based on actual clients that our police department brings there. But it's a little difficult because the clients come from all over. They come from hospitals. They come from police departments. There are some walk-ins too. So,
Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess clients is a very generous term in some of these respects, especially when you're talking about the police situations. And I'm curious as it relates to in the instances when a police officer is bringing someone to this center, how often are we seeing an adjudication of a crime as it relates to that entry into the Arapahoe House, for lack of a better term? Or do we have any indication of how often that results in some kind of fine or penalty or adjudication?
I don't. That's an interesting question. And that's something I think with this reporting requirements that maybe we'll have better data on that in the years to come. I thought maybe our division chief would be staying here for this discussion. He might be able to answer some of those questions, but I don't think we have that data, honestly, Zach.
The reason I'm asking is it relates to this is a specific cost related to a specific population as a result of specific actions, and so as best we can, we should be able to adhere those costs to that population in whether it's billing insurance or whether it's tacking on fees or penalties related to a specific adjudication or something, so that we can at least try to recover some of the costs involved that we're otherwise expending. And if we can't, we can't. But I think there might be some benefit to at least understanding, can we add a surcharge to their criminal conviction if there happens to be one? Not saying that all situations that end up here have to result in a criminal conviction, but And if they do, is there a surcharge that can be added to that to help us recoup some of these costs?
I think it's a good point, and honestly, the former mayor, when we were working on this, said, could we have a fee associated with liquor stores and bars? You know, potentially a lot of the folks that are in and up here are because of their buying liquids and drinks at those establishments. So, you know, I don't know if that's fair, if that's something that people would support or not, but that goes along those lines, I think, of trying to charge back where maybe these issues are coming from. Yep.
Mr. Matthews?
Patrick, you can probably help me out with this because I know Chief did do a presentation on this some time ago, and just for the benefit of the folks at home, we have very few options on how to handle this particular problem in the house because we have no city jail. And so the only other alternative that I'm aware of right now is Jefferson County Jail, and that may seem like a slam dunk, but the intake process of getting out to Jefferson County Jail is cumbersome and expensive and ties up a lot of officer hours. And I think this is a little bit more gracious for officer time as far as the intake. It's less of a legal procedure per se, but if you can add some comments for the folks at home.
Sure. No, Mr. Matthews.
What the benefit is of having this here.
Yeah. That's a good topic, and there's actually law that states you cannot put somebody in jail just for drunkenness. They have to commit a crime, and being drunk is not committing a crime. So we cannot just, our officers, if this center was not here, our officers cannot take them to a jail. And that was partly some of the concern that, you know, just to put these folks in a place that might be safe, that some officers might push it a little too far and take them to jail and you know, push the case that maybe they'd committed a crime and maybe they truly haven't. I'm not saying that happens or we do that or our officers do that, but that's some of the thoughts that people had. The other issue is if there's no detox center, a lot of these folks end up in hospitals, and hospitals do not have the resources to manage these folks who could be violent, could be, you know, they're not necessarily medically in danger. They just need to detox, and they don't have the resources to do it either. So, and as you mentioned, we don't, the city has a holding cell, I think holds maybe 2 people. But those are not we don't have the resources to manage somebody who's detoxing either. So it's very important. The center does have the folks that, by law, they have to have a certain number of qualified, experienced, licensed folks that can manage people detoxing. And so it is a safe environment for those folks. And without this type of place, the other options are hospital or letting them, or nothing, or, you know, letting them walk the street, basically.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
Would this facility handle any court-ordered services, or is this strictly a detox at that time? This doesn't go on ongoing treatment or stop-bys for sobriety checks or?
They do. This portion of Jefferson Center for Mental Health Services is short-term detoxification. So once they are determined to be detoxed, if that's the right word, and can leave safely without harming them or themselves, they're released. So that's usually within a 24-hour period. Jefferson Center for Mental Health does provide many other services, long-term addiction services, mental health services, which they're hoping to. There's some numbers and percentages on. I think a large percentage of these folks that do end up at Arapahoe House and now Jefferson Center have other issues that Jefferson Center hopefully can then flag and help these folks so that it's not a habitual issue and they just keep coming back. And so some of them may turn into long-term services.
So that would be sort of another source of revenue from
Yes.
from clients that would go to to offset the cost of running this facility?
Yes.
And then would we then, I assume that the budget assumes that there is no additional funding from outside sources, from clients or other providers to fund this?
No, the budget that they've requested from us is $500,000, and that is to supplement what they're getting from other. So they're getting approximately, it's over $1.2 million, I think maybe $1.2 million from the state. Then they do get, as I mentioned before, Medicare, Medicaid covers some of the folks. Some folks pay out of pocket, but there's quite a few that don't. So, and Jefferson Center may have more resources than Arapahoe House had as a nonprofit, which they can manage more efficiently, I think, with some of their integrated services. So that their hope is that their business model is going to be more efficient, and hopefully they can be sustainable long term without asking for more money.
Do you think this would ultimately lead to a decrease in the financial responsibility that we would incur?
That's one option. We've been working with folks down at the state and the governor's office to try to get them to realize that this was a declaration that they made back in the 70s, that this is a statewide concern. They're providing funding, but they're not providing enough funding. So there are some lobbying efforts to try to get the state to cover more of the full funding. So if that happens, there's potential that our contribution could decrease.
And the MOU provides for that reduction? And
it does. I think there's a section in there that states if additional funding is found, that ours will be reduced. And there's also not every entity in Jefferson County is a party to this, but they can be serviced by Jefferson Center, but they'll have a pay for service type arrangement where they pay for the number of folks they drop off, and so there's revenue sources from those, such as Mountain View is not a party. There's some mountain towns that aren't a party, Morrison. So if they use the services, that they have to pay per client they drop off.
And do you think that our police department would be that we would have some increased costs or obligations for our department or our city by virtue of the fact that this was located in our jurisdiction?
Well, it's always been in Wheat Ridge for many years, so it's not a new impact to our city. It is an impact because there's police departments from all the Jefferson County municipalities that bring folks to the center, and we do get called there if there is an issue with a client. And this MOU, if you read it fully and saw the attachment at the end, one thing that was added at the end was a process to handle detox refusals. If there's folks that are too violent for the staff that's on hand, the police departments and the sheriff's office has worked together to come up with a process of dealing with those folks, and they will they can be taken to the jail if they become violent, and or hospital if they need those types of services.
But not our jail.
Not our jail, and that could impact our police department depending on when that detox refusal happens. If it happens when a different jurisdiction's police department is intaking that person and they determine that Jefferson Center cannot handle them, that department has to take them somewhere else, to the jail or to the hospital. But if it happens after the fact, a different department, Arvada, Lakewood, Westminster drops somebody off, and then that officer leaves, and then Jefferson Center determines that they have a person that needs to be refused, our police department's going to take care of that.
And one more question. This facility is sort of between, or it's a commercial location, but it's adjacent to a residential neighborhood, and this would have security that would be appropriate for the clients and the situations that they would perhaps encounter? Correct. The security should be, I'm not aware of too many issues when it was under Arapahoe House's care. It is adjacent somewhat to a residential neighborhood, but I haven't heard of many situations. I'm not sure if you all have. A few, yeah. But yeah, they do have the security in house. But sometimes they do release some of these folks
they release them on foot, and they may walk through neighborhoods, and so there may be some perceptions of safety because of that.
I guess we'd want to have a good understanding of the protocols under which those situations would arise. Mr. Fitzgerald?
Well, I was going to ask if we were ready for a consensus, but
Mr. Urban?
I was just going to say that as it relates to other organizations ponying up, I know that the Lutheran Medical Center Foundation provided a significant amount of investment in this as well, and that appears to be an ongoing support simply because the hospital is second to the jail, the largest intaker of these individuals. And as it relates to what we were just talking about with regard to an exit plan, when these people are either refused or discharged, is it plausible to consider asking them to be discharged into the jurisdiction in which they came in from? And knowing that that's that may be a logistical hurdle to overcome, it would make sense that Wheat Ridge is not sort of dumping ground, so to speak, of individuals primarily on foot walking through our neighborhoods and whatnot. And I have had several constituents in that immediate neighborhood complain about some of the few and far between, but enough to be concerned as it relates to their safety. And so, while we're paying our fair share as it relates to the population numbers, we do see an inordinate number of impacts from this center being in our community. We do see a benefit in the fact that our police don't have to go as far to get someone to where they need to be. That being said, I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that we're bearing the brunt of what no other municipality would want to have to place into a community right now. So I just ask us to keep that in mind and to at least entertain some way to develop a robust departure and exit strategy for these individuals so that they can return from where they came.
Yeah, it's a good question, Mr. Urban. I don't know the details on it, but I'll make sure the chief is here for Monday if you decide to bring this forward. And then also on your point of this is in Wheat Ridge and this impacts Wheat Ridge, and believe me, I've mentioned that numerous times to my other fellow city managers, and they say, well, in Lakewood, we have community corrections, and in Westminster, we got this. And it's like, so we're all even. It's like, well.
What did Arvada say they had?
I know. Let's see. Arvada, yeah, I don't know what Arvada said they had. But
some are more even than others.
Yeah.
So anyway, is there more discussion? Are we ready for a consensus? Mr. Fitzgerald?
I suggest we reach a consensus that we bring this forward on Monday, and we pay the bill.
The will of the council? We have consensus on that? Good. Okay. That will dispatch that item. Okay, that is most of our regular agenda. We skipped staff reports, so I will go back there. Mr. Goff, do we have staff reports tonight?
Yeah, just a couple quick things. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to remind everybody, and for the new folks, mainly Leah, I guess, there's the National League of Cities holds a conference annually in March. It's a Congressional City Conference. It's this year it's scheduled from March 10th to the 14th, and I'll hand these out so you have this as a reminder. The city does budget for three of you to attend. If more want to attend in any one year, you can use your own personal outreach, your own city council person's outreach funds in the city budget to attend. But it's there's a few of you have gone. I don't know if you want to lobby for the new folks to attend, or if you have any comments about the anything you learned at these conferences. But I just wanted to give you all a heads up because it does take some staff time to prepare for these. So if anybody would like to attend, we would kind of like to know sooner than later. And then the hotels do get booked up very quickly. So if you're really interested in going, we need to get at least your rooms reserved, and those can always be canceled. So even if you're just thinking about it, let us know so that we can get some rooms blocked out and then cancel those if you decide not to go. This is just a very tentative agenda. They haven't put together their full agenda yet, but we do have an opportunity to meet with our federal congressional delegation while we're there, and/or their staff. and talk about things that are impacting Wheat Ridge directly. So just a heads up on that, and if you are interested, please let Janice know, and she can help you out with any registration, and we can just get a head count so if we know we need to plan to prepare for the conference. And the other item, real quick item I had was, a couple of you have mentioned, have asked me if we're going to have a retreat this next year. So I was just wanted to get kind of temperature from everybody on if that's something you want to do, if that's something you want staff to start thinking about and potentially looking at facilitators, getting people on the calendars, or if you have any ideas, so we don't have to come to any conclusions tonight, but something that if you'd like to, it's so hard to get, especially if you want to do it the first quarter, it's hard to get on everybody's calendars, and if it's something you want to do, we'd like to start planning that. So if you want to discuss that a little bit more tonight, you can. If not, we can discuss it at a meeting coming up too. So just 2 items.
Okay, discussion on a retreat. Ms. Hoppy?
I think retreats are effective, but I don't feel like there was an 100% final product that came out of our last one.
There is and there isn't. Mr. Fitzgerald and I spoke about that. We do have a final product, but I think that could be a way, if you want to have a retreat, that could be something that we could do. It was a very long document of action items that came out of that retreat, and we didn't really prioritize those down to something that was manageable for a year or two. That's something, if we don't have a retreat, I want to bring that back to a study session to discuss with this group. We're working on a lot of things that are on that action list, but we need to kind of look at it again, I think, and prioritize it, make sure that you're all still on board with what came out of that.
I think what I would prefer to do is to finish up the last retreat we had before we look at having another one, is kind of how I feel like. I feel like that, I feel like the way we left it was that there was some work to be done on it, and we were supposed to turn in our stuff, and then we were supposed to see something after that. And I don't feel like we saw the final step, see something after that. So I would actually prefer that we finish up that work first before we move on. But I do appreciate the work groups that happen in retreats.
Mr. Ann?
I was just going to say, I agree with Janice. I'd like to kind of see the action items we had brought back to us at a study session and maybe kind of work through those and get those kind of finished up also before we schedule another retreat.
More comments? Well, I'm going to go the other way. We just had an election. We have a new counselor here. We have a new mayor. We were not party to this, and I think it would be handy if we have things that weren't completed in the last retreat. I think we ought to maybe address those, but I don't think that's a substitute for sort of getting together and making a plan of action that serves our city. Mr. Pond.
I might suggest we can do both. I think the 2 action items, one that I think you guys are referring to both of them. One would be looking at the longer list of items that came out of that and prioritizing it, which I think should happen as early as possible, and in the study session is fine. The other item, and I do think it was batted around, and perhaps it's just, again, daylighting that at the study session, was the redrafting of the vision and the wording and really the template of that, which perhaps we in some ways did finalize, but not perhaps to the extent of bringing it back up here in its final form, discussing it, etc. I think both of those things could be done at a study session, perhaps in the same night, but I wouldn't push that unless we felt we could get that done. And I think if we did that in the first couple of months, I suppose we still have a chance to do a retreat after that, perhaps before we get too far into the year.
Mr. Fitzgerald.
I think a couple people said stuff that was really valuable. I agree with Janice about the way it was sort of left. I also agree with with Patrick that one of the things that is lacking is prioritization and narrowing down stuff that it's possible to work on, because we have too much, it became meaningless because there's too much there. I don't think it's possible, though, to do both. I think we have to do one or the other, and I think I would opt myself for having a retreat. And maybe we can finish at the retreat, we can finish what we did before, or we can start over. I don't know, but starting over, as you know how difficult that is, but at least we can have a little more time to prioritize what it is we should be working on. So I'm going to go with let's have a retreat.
Ms. Hoppy.
I mean, we did really good work at the retreat, and I took pictures of all of those slides, and I refer back to those slides because that's the best document that I have on what we did in that retreat. And so I think that we need something more solid and a better document first. Yes, I agree. I would like to have Leah and Bud in those conversations, but I don't want to scratch the work that we did. And so, I think that if we can finish up what we had, then I'm definitely happy to finish up the work we had and then work on another retreat, because I know that it will be different. It'll bring up different stuff, and it will most likely be facilitated differently. So it's so we'll get different information out of it than we got out of our first retreat, which I'm perfectly happy with. But I definitely want to make sure that we finish up what we did prior.
And as we did this last year, if you remember, we brought the facilitator in. We had 3 study sessions first to get a lot of the background work done, and maybe I would suggest we schedule at least a couple study sessions to revisit what came out of the last retreat, and then see how far we get on that. And then if you guys want to schedule a retreat on some other topics after that point, maybe that's a good process to go.
Mr. Matthews.
Yeah, I was looking through the tentative schedule, and in March, we have no issues listed yet for study sessions. And in February, we are a little bit tied up with holidays, but we still have one not real busy study session. So in the first quarter, I see at least 3 opportunities where we don't have other business that seems to be pressing, where we could maybe spend some scheduled time and have some prep time first, where documents would come out to everybody and we'd have a chance to think about them before the meeting, and then make some decisions on a full-blown retreat.
Mr. Ann?
I just wanted to say, we did put a lot of work and effort and a weekend into, coming up with some action plans. If we could kind of discuss those, tie those up, and then, decide if we want to move forward with a retreat and have one, even if it's a little bit later in the year. And then this would kind of give yourself and Leah, awareness of what we discussed, action plans we came up with, and kind of get your feedback on that too. So that's what.
And I guess what I'm looking at is that we're on essentially a 2-year calendar. So we've just had an election. We've got the same council and mayor for the next 2 years. It would seem to me like, just in a larger context, that this would be the year that we would go and do a retreat, the even number year, because then we have 2 years to be together to work on those types of issues. So it wouldn't seem to me that we would schedule a retreat the year before that we're going to have a general election and change some or majority perhaps of our council. Recognizing the work that you've done, it seems like we all, I'm anxious to sort of get on the same page with everybody else. Now, if we take the material that we've got and have a forum that we can sit down and discuss that, come up to speed with what the dialogue were, how the dialogue went and what the positions were, or the discussion. That's all I'm really looking for, is that we kind of have a chance to meet, other than sort of an hour and a half or 2 hours on a night at a study session in a formal setting like this. that's kind of what I'm looking for, is the opportunity to be able to discuss some of these issues. We've talked about bringing the NRS up this year. We've got a 50th anniversary celebration to sort of kick off, hopefully, and I'm sure other things that are near and dear to everybody and to to our constituents. So that's sort of more where I'm coming from.
So just to clarify, you'd like to have a retreat and we could bring the action items in that we worked on last year? And we could kind of discuss and go through those?
If we've got
Kind of finish them up.
good background information,
Advertising.
let's get together in a more informal setting so that we, let's look at those. I fully believe, I'm sure you guys did great work, but
I just
and
wanted-
if we haven't concluded that process, then this gives us an opportunity to sort of distill the information that we've got. If we've got too many action items, let's pare it down to where we can, be effective.
I just want to make sure we're including those action items and not being dismissed, that we include them, talk about them, and kind of go over them together.
I would certainly hope that we would have those. Ms. Dozman.
Okay.
So I certainly respect the fact that you guys, want to kind of go over all of the action items. I've heard from several people that the retreat was really productive, and so that is something that I would really like to be a part of. I know that you guys have some great informal conversations, and that creates a lot of collaboration and partnerships that I feel is integral to us moving forward as a council. So I would like to recommend that, yes, we maybe discuss some of those former action items that we may not have met yet in those study sessions, and then we do have a retreat especially to talk about the NRS, because that's going to be a big topic of conversation coming forward. So,
Additional comments? Does anyone want to? Mr. Hoppy?
So I guess I'd just try to bring this around to a consensus. And so I would like for a consensus for us to look at organizing and prioritizing the action items that were identified at the last retreat in a new retreat setting. And then at that point, we will then look for a new facilitator to start a new retreat process sometime within the first quarter of next year. Does that sound like I captured everything that everybody was thinking?
We use a facilitator during that first process too? The same facilitator maybe since?
Yes.
Okay.
I think the distinction I would ask for is whether or not, and this is an important distinction, whether or not the first thing that you're referring to is actually in a study session or is in a, when you say retreat format, not here, and with extended hours and something like that. So just to be clear on that.
So I don't care either way, but what I've heard is that some people would like it in a more informal setting. And so then I would ask that that both meetings be put in a off-site location.
Is it one meeting together?
2 meetings.
2 separate meetings?
I think so. I think if we could get our stuff together in one, and then maybe the next week, like if we could do a Friday evening for one, and then like the next week we could do the Saturday day big piece maybe, or just because we did the study sessions prior last time, I don't think that we can finish up last time and then start up for the next time all in one weekend.
Mr. Ann?
How about I make a consensus that we have an off-site retreat to finish up with the prioritizing and finalizing the action items from the last retreat. And I start there, and I separate them. Can I ask for a consensus for that? Okay.
Do you have a show of hands for that? So it seems to have consensus. Is that the retreat, or do we have consensus for
That's the
Does
consensus
that-
for the final, for
First retreat.
finishing up the first retreat.
Yeah, I think in a way we're perhaps debating the amount of time that we need to, that we can get to, when we can get to it, and how much we can put onto that plate. And so I think, if we think we're going to go for a Saturday or for a Friday evening, and I don't know in that scenario that we're going to do much more than get through the prioritization of the previous discussion, which would leave a couple, it would leave a couple of things like the NRS and perhaps some other topics where we would want to get further in depth at jeopardy of not having the time. And if that's the case, I think we have to ask ourselves, are we going to be able to mobilize for another sit down sometime again before, you said first quarter even? So I think it's aggressive to think that we're going to be able to get 2 Saturdays in the first half of the year, frankly. So I think we have to be a little bit careful about what's the topics that we're trying to accomplish inside of a retreat.
So I guess kind of what I was thinking schedule-wise is that maybe that we treat it as 2 separate processes. So the first process is finishing up the first retreat, and the next one is a new process. And with the new process, that includes pre-study sessions, and then depending on how the study sessions go, determine if it needs to be another Friday night and Saturday, or if it could be just a Saturday morning or something like that from there. So it would be kind of how I vision that.
Mr. Pond?
Well, my question would be, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, and I think Mr. Matthews mentioned about some of our open dates. I mean, that you've mentioned maybe a handful or at least 2 or 3 study sessions necessary to do some of that work. And I'd actually say, fine, that sounds good. And the first of which could be, in fact, the prioritization of action items, the discussion of action items, and the other ones, as you mentioned, being essentially preparatory meetings for a retreat, and then have the retreat. So, I mean, and I think we actually have the time.
Well, we could do that in the second quarter, too. If we can do the first part in the first quarter and the second part in the second quarter.
Mr.
Sorry,
Ann?
Mr. Ann.
That's okay. My thought is, why don't we just use a couple study sessions to go over what we did last year, go over our action items, and in those 2 study sessions, we can kind of prioritize, right? And limit what we want to discuss, and have a retreat on a Saturday, Friday evening, Saturday, like we did last time. How's that for a consensus?
Do we have consensus around that idea?
So the first consensus that's already been made was that with the action items and the prioritization, that would be done in a retreat setting with the same facilitator that we had dealt with prior to finish that process. So that was the first consensus that everybody made. So let me clarify. So you're saying we keep that and then we do a second one in the second quarter?
No, I'm saying we don't do that at all. Instead, we have study sessions, if it takes 2 or 3, since we have time here to go through those action items that we did last year at the retreat. And then we have a retreat in the second quarter.
Just to remind you there, because we are going to need some time to go through what we went. There's 28. We came up with 28 goals and 64 action items, and it's gotten a little cumbersome. And again, we're working on probably numerous ones of those, and I think we can give updates on those. But there's a lot that, is it a priority for you guys to get to this next year, or is this like a 3-year project? There's no way we can work on 64 of these action items all in the next year.
I just know it's hard for people to put time aside for 2 weekends.
No, exactly. No, I agree. And I think we can do it in several studies, so that was my point. I think we're going to need more than 1 hour study session, I think.
Sure.
Yep.
And you can probably go through those and see what we've already worked on so far.
Yeah, and I'm comfortable with changing it to study
you?
session. Yeah,
Okay.
that was my original thought, was that we would do that, and so.
Okay.
Okay, if I might offer then a revised consensus, if I might, that we take the information that we generated from the retreat from last year, have a couple of study sessions that we bring everybody back together and understand the context by which we were talking about, see if we can distill some of that information, and then schedule a new retreat for the year. We have consensus on that? We have consensus on that. Do you have that?
I got it.
You got it? Okay. Well,
Thank you.
all right, thanks so much.
So staff can start working on the actual retreat. Do you want to wait till after a couple of these study sessions are done to give an idea of what you want your retreat to be?
I would suggest we don't have a clue of what we're going to retreat about until we get through the study
okay.
sessions.
We won't work on that yet, but should I start like scheduling dates and times? Do you want to?
You should put,
Is your goal to do something in March, April?
Yeah, I think if we could hopefully do it in the first quarter
Okay.
or early in the second quarter, so that we still get it kind of new and in the new year.
Okay. We'll look for something in March. Okay.
That is your spring, that would be your spring break. Okay. Okay, you got, that's all you got? Okay, good. We have now item number 5, elected officials reports. Do we have counselors that would like to opine on anything? Ms. Hoppy?
So 2 things. First off, the Wheat Ridge Business District will be meeting this week, and so next week I'll have a new report, but we did have, I can't remember if I reported out, but we had some really awesome walkthroughs on some great projects for the extended facade program that City Council approved money for, $50,000, and we found some really great projects. And so once we have that meeting this Thursday, then I'll be able to report out the projects, and everybody will be able to start looking forward to seeing those changes. And then second, I wanted to ask, and if this is the wrong time to ask, I wanted to ask Patrick, is there any way that as city councilors that we could have a district page on the city website? Like it could be District 1, and then like Ms. Duran and I could each have our own half of the page, and we can post our own stuff on there?
Sure.
Or like, can we do stuff like that?
Yeah, as long as it's city related and
Right. Right. Well, I mean, I'm thinking like me.
non-election related. Yeah, of
Right.
course. Yep.
You know.
Yeah. If you have an idea, get with me and we can work with our web folks and create a template. Maybe we'll come back and present it to everybody so they know what the options
Utilize
are.
our public information officer
Yeah.
a little bit. for
Yep.
that. Okay, thank you.
Any other elected officials matters? Ms. Dozman?
So I just wanted to give a little update. I participated in a futures conference that is reimagining Wheat Ridge area schools on November 7th, 8th, and 9th. Mr. Starker was able to come the last day and kind of hear our group's progress. But what has come out of that is 5 committees that are working towards a common vision for Wheat Ridge area schools and how to collaborate together and really strengthen our schools as a whole, and get the students interested and engaged, and go to Wheat Ridge High School, basically. And I also participated in a meeting Tuesday at Pennington Elementary, and the district is proposing the school become an expeditionary learning program. What that looks like, we're going to be finding out a little bit more information on, but they are going to be kind of coinciding with the extended learning time program that we already have in place that is serving a very high low-income population. So I'm really excited about that, and I invite the community to be a part of that. And I also wanted to let everyone know that Larry Matthews and I will be having a meet and greet on Tuesday, December 12th at 6:30 p.m. at Pietro's Pizzeria on 44th and Field. And so we are inviting our constituents and those who would like to speak with us on various issues to attend. 6:30.
Thank you very much. That segues into another one that I needed to accomplish this evening, and that is special committees and council appointments to special committees. A number of you are sitting on special committees, and all of those are continuing forward. I had 2 vacancies generated by the election, and one is the Jefferson County School Liaison, and I would like to ask if Ms. Hoppy and Ms. Dozman would like to sit on that committee. Good. And then I have the Applewood Business Association. I believe Applewood has probably a noon meeting once a month. And is there, sorry, I wasn't able to generate more information about that at this time. Would you like to?
I can do that. I think it kind of correlates with what
Okay.
we do with the business district also.
Very good. We will put Ms. Hoppy on that. And that concluded all of the information that I had. Is there any other business to come before this study session? Madam Clerk?
I just wanted to remind the folks that ran for office that your second report is due December 7th.
Thank you very much, Pearl Harbor Day. And I would like to thank all of the participants and attendees of the holiday celebration on the green at 38th. It was a very, very great turnout and really a great event. So, you know, everything conspired to make it a great event, great weather, and a big super full moon, and great participation from everyone in the city, and I think surrounding communities. So I think it's a great event, and I want to thank everybody that helped put that together. So with that, we will stand adjourned. Thank you all.